empezamos a pensar en esto de invitar a grandes referentes de la comunicación.
Nosotros entendemos que nuestros mejores años son los próximos 10.
Patricia, in translation, has told me today that I need to speak slowly because there are more words in Spanish to cover what I have to say in English. So if it sounds like I'm talking out of a tunnel, I'm just trying to go slowly. 3 years ago in Scotland, I was at a meeting, and at that meeting, I met Diego and Pipe. And as they arrived there, they were just telling me how proud they were that they'd been taking English lessons for the last year in preparation for this meeting. And it was great to know that they were that keen to work and meet with a whole bunch of different people. But it really didn't matter, because once they showed us the work of Notable Publicidad, and we saw how creative the agency was, they didn't need to speak English, because we were so impressed with what they were doing. It was great to have a contact in Uruguay that worked in the same world as we did. And language doesn't become a barrier, because creativity often transcends those things. So when they asked me to come down here to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, I was very proud to come down. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I was asked to talk about what's happening in the Canadian marketing place with trends. And just before I do that, I thought I would just tell you briefly who we are. We've been in the market now. There we go. We've been in business now for about 23 years. We started off in one industry. We're now operating in 6 industries. The company started with 5 individuals. They're now 150. And with any agency's growth, as you grow, your services start to grow because your clients are asking more and more from you. And then obviously, as you grow, the types of businesses and the types of brands that you take on grow as well. Today we have operating 3 agencies. One in Toronto that looks after promotions, direct, digital, shopper marketing, and advertising, of which there are 80 people. OSL Montreal that does very similar promotions, advertising, and direct, where there are 30 members. And then about 4 years ago, we launched a different brand name because we were finding that we were running into a lot of conflict. So Toronto, for all its size, is really quite a small country. There's only 30 million people. And I would say about 10 million of them live in the GTA around Toronto, Burlington, Mississauga. And what happens is all of the head offices for marketing are all in the Toronto area. So what happens is if you work on Frito-Lay, sweet snacks, it's very difficult for you to work on, say, Mars, like M&M's, Frito-Lay salty snacks, Mars sweet snacks. So we set up a separate agency with separate creative, and now there's 40 people there, and the business is growing. So OSL has continued to grow even during the downturns. And to give you an idea of the businesses that we work on, some of them are global brands like PepsiCo and Quaker, M&M's, But then there are specific ones to Canada, like banks, like Scotiabank. We work on LG, Bayer, etc. But it's a nice cross-section of packaged goods, financial services, and sort of an all-other category. The 4 trends that I want to address today, and Pipe has asked me to make sure that I do this in half an hour, are the value-driven consumer, owning the data, the speed and the danger of social media, and the power of retail. Let's start with owning the data. The world's changing so quickly that if you think about in the old days when you used to have loyalty cards or key fobs that when you went to, for example, like fill up with gas at a Shell station and stuff like that, they would collect your data. That world is slowly changing as everything goes digital. The change has gone from, in the old days where retailers would try to own the data and try to own the consumer. And then obviously the creation of loyalty programs like Air Miles, which I'm sure is here as well in Uruguay. But I want to spend a minute talking about the one below that, which is Aeroplan. It is Air Canada's our largest air flight carrier. And they have almost 12 million active members on their loyalty card. And Canadians, probably like most people, but Canadians are obsessive with collecting points, mostly because it gets us out of the freezing cold when we cash in our points and head south for the winter. And slowly, manufacturers are now trying to get into the game of loyalty. And I'm going to give you an example of how that's working right now, because it's become such a turf war of who owns the customer. Because really the customer is being dragged between, is it going to be retailers that own the customer, or is it going to be the brands that own the customer? Not only that, the customer is split. In the old days, it was relatively easy to have name, address, and purchase history. But nowadays, you have access to their followers and their friends and their profiles through Facebook, through Twitter, through friends. So the consumer and owning that consumer is becoming a much more powerful tool. What we did for PepsiCo was to try to create a long-term loyalty program. Now, you all know that creating loyalty, you normally need a fairly high value of your product to invest in loyalty. So what we had to do was come up with a currency that wasn't related to dollars. And the currency that we ended up using was Aeroplan miles using the Air Canada loyalty program. Every single product of Tropicana and Frito-Lay and Quaker and actually Aquafina was in there as well, carried an individual PIN number. And that PIN number was worth X number of points, depending on what the product was. So it became almost transactional that people would go out and we would know which households bought Tropicana, and we could send them incentives to buy Quaker or incentives to stock up on other brands. But the thing was, it was transactional because every PIN number went to a specific product. So we knew if it was Tropicana 1.89 liter or Tropicana jugs, etc. So this data was very rich. But the trick to the arrangement was we had to negotiate with Air Canada as to who would own the data. And at the end, we, PepsiCo, owned the data for our people. But when this program comes to an end, we need to give that data back to Air Canada. So it's an interesting dilemma for the manufacturer where you invest all this money to build up a program just to, and to own those consumers, but to find that you eventually have to turn those consumers back again to the original currency. The second one I want to talk about is the value-driven consumer. And what we found in Canada is that the gap between the value buyer and the luxury buyer continues to increase. What's affecting that, obviously, is the economy. And I'm sure it's happening here as well. Where, versus Americans, our confidence continues to remain very high, mostly because our banks weren't able to get into the lending mess that the American banks did with the subprime mortgages. 57% say their personal finances are good to excellent, but they're using any spare cash they have to pay down debt. Because obviously debt has become a scary word. It's become a scary word probably for everybody now. But 30% of Canadians will continue to spend less on clothes. They're going to scale back out-of-home entertainment and dining and consumer packaged good purchases. So we, as agencies and clients, need to find value-added ways to continue to sell our products. And just a quick example for Taco Bell, what they did was we created a program with the launch of the Xbox 360 Halo game. People were lining up outside of stores to pick up Halo. With Taco Bell, they were able to get a head start on some of that stuff. But because the country's so big, we had to create a value system where franchisees across the country could download material in a print-ready format that would allow them to price it specifically for their regions so they could establish the correct value. So all the material, even though it was supported through Facebook and Twitter, etc., the primary driver was the in-store piece, and the in-store piece had to be customized over 150 retailers across the country. Social media. I'm going to give you two examples here. An example that worked well and an example that did not work well at all. It's an interesting sphere because clients are investing heavily in social. And dollars are being moved from traditional advertising to social media. But there's no unknown. The ROI, nobody's got a formula for the ROI. There's no terminology that people use. In mass advertising, we used to talk about reach and frequency and GRPs, and we as agencies could talk to you as marketers. You as marketers could talk to your CEOs and say, well, this is going to be my launch weight, or this is going to be my maintenance weight. And everybody knew what you were talking about. Now, with social media, it's a guess. There's no way that you can talk to each other in a way that your CEOs understand really what you're doing and how is this going to impact your brands and what is going to be the ROI. And the funny thing about social media is that it's cool. You know, it's where's the instruction manual to make it happen? And if I do this in social media, will I become marketer of the year? But then it comes down to the real question is how much will it sell? Or I want a viral campaign. And you just can't make these things happen. So Pepsi created a program in the States and Canada. I don't think it came down here. It was called Pepsi Refresh. They moved away from advertising, which was all about the joy of Pepsi, into creating a program where people could vote on where to send money to do good things. Like you could send it to charities, or you could give computers to schools, or you could repaint something. And all these ideas came in, and Pepsi chose the best ideas and funded the ideas. It was all done through social media. The theory was that if people were connecting with the brand and Pepsi was doing great things, then Pepsi would sell more. Good idea. what happened that for the first time in history, Pepsi fell from the number 2 soft drink to the number 3 soft drink after Coke and Diet Coke. I'm sure that wasn't the plan. But I'll give you another PepsiCo example of Frito-Lay. The concept for Frito-Lay was to launch a new flavor. But they didn't know which flavor to launch. So, good idea, using social and the internet, we're going to go out and get people to vote on which flavor. And they actually launched into retailers a white bag and a red and a black bag, one called A and one called B, that people could buy and taste and vote as to which one actually would die. It wasn't which one would live, it was which one would die. And the question became, how are you going to kill it? Because you got to put a twist on it. How are you going to kill the brand? So it started off with a TV commercial, and let's show the commercial.
Jak se jmenují?
Cibulové kroužky s kečupem.
Řecí křidélka waflou somáčku.
Obě jsou dobré, ale jedné se musíme zbavit.
Right? It's still happening right now, but I wanted to show you where this is going. At the time that I took this screenshot, this particular person was in the lead of influencing the outcome of this thing. He had tweeted or retweeted 2.6 million times. He'd had 380 emails. He'd been on Facebook for 176,000 impressions. All this, and knowing that he was only one of 28,000 other people that were working at the time. So if you take the multiplication of those sort of numbers times 28,000, the impact of these people talking to their friends and getting their friends to talk to their friends to work out who's going to kill the bad flavor is a significantly successful campaign. It's not over yet, but we already know that sales are surpassing expectations. So if you look at the two, I don't think you could have necessarily planned that this would be successful. And I doubt that Pepsi, when they did the refresh program, could have planned that it may not have generated the results they were looking for. But we as marketers have a responsibility to our brands before we just jump into social media. We need to really sit back and say, is this the right thing I'm going to do? Is this percent of the allocation of the budget the right amount? Do we need to generate a little bit more history before we invest more money? And agencies have a responsibility. Obviously, marketers have that responsibility. Lastly, the Canadian retail space. For a country our size, 80% of the market is owned by 5 retailers, which makes it obviously very important that you're successful at retail if your products are going to be successful. Retailers are no longer just demanding customized programs, but they want the programs to be original to them. So it's no longer, we used to be able to create one program and make it slightly different for this guy and slightly different for that guy. Now we have to create programs specifically for retailers. 46% of retailers are planning to switch their attention away from promotions. So all the more important that it is that we find things that they buy into. This particular program that we created this 10 years ago for Canada's largest retailer, which is Loblaws. It started off in just 57 stores, and it has grown to across the country. They own this program, and it's so much so that in their calendar, they plan it every year. So we don't need to go sell it in. It's actually planned in the calendar. It's a simple program where consumers can either choose cars or a cottage or vacations. There's nothing complicated about it, but what's happened over time is that Loblaws feels it is their program and not PepsiCo's program, even though PepsiCo continues to be the only manufacturer. Another one was done for ConAgra and Chinese New Year. This one started off in store. Eventually, it grew into a total 360 program with advertising, social media, blogging, Facebook. This thing's been running for 4 years now, and it continues to get great results, and we're mostly getting those results because of the 360 nature of the program. Lastly, as many people have talked today, mobile continues to grow. Retailers are embracing mobile quicker than brands are. One of the big retailers in Canada, which is like a hardware store, which is called Canadian Tire, have got a great app that they've developed to allow people to access what's on special and not. But more importantly, they've allowed the consumers to actually rate every single product in the store. So this isn't Canadian Tire rating these products for quality or features or performance. These are actually the consumers rating these products. And they've had to let go and have faith that the consumers can actually fairly represent these products. Walmart is now allowing you to order your products online, and you just have to go to the store and pick them up, already bundled together. So if you think about the old days where they wanted you to walk up and down the aisles, obviously they would normally want you to do that for the unplanned purchases. Now they're just planning. You go there, it's all bundled, you collect it. Last slide is, I'm sure everybody's heard of shopper marketing. It continues to permeate all discussions. In the old days, it was called customer marketing, where you created programs between brands and retailers. Everything now is focused against the shopper, how the pattern that they shop the store, whether they're just going for a quick shop or a large shop for the family. Whether how they look at the section. Do they look at the top shelves, middle shelves, bottom shelves? Where do you put your displays? Do you put your displays of chips next to the soda section, or do you put your display of chips next to the movie section? And all this science now is allowing us to develop better insights, better programs, and because if you think about it with the fragmented media, where manufacturers can still get their consumers is at retail. There you go. I think I did it within my 25 minutes. Thank you very much.